We had previously to this had very positive interactions with police and any public servants, and taught our children to respect them. And it's like your family's a circle, and the children feel secure in that, and they know what to expect. And then when government intrusion that's so wrong comes in and breaks into that circle, and you're dealing with that mistrust, you're dealing with the suspicion, you're dealing with the fear for a long time with your children. You really are.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. You can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes as well as upcoming guests and topics, sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoyed the program. Here's your host, Jim Mason.
Hello, my name is Jim Mason, President of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, welcoming you to another edition of Homeschool Talks, where we talk about interesting topics for homeschooling families, and we talk with interesting people. And my guest today is Shirley Calabretta, an interesting person from sort of a blast from the past in HSLDA's history. Welcome, Shirley.
Thank you. Yes.
Where are you casting pods from today?
We are in California, Northern California.
Northern California. So Shirley Calabretta is probably one of the most significant people to my legal career since coming to HSLDA. And it had sort of unfortunate beginnings, but it ended up having huge benefits for many, many families all across the country. So let me just set the stage. Homeschool Legal Defense Association defends the right of families to homeschool, and that often involves conflicts with school districts and other education officials. But something we learned very early on is that homeschoolers tend to homeschool in their homes, which is, kind of a novel thought, but we learned that was the case, and we learned that sometimes public officials don't respect the Fourth Amendment rights of families to be secure in their own homes. And Shirley Calabretta and her family were one of the first families that kind of helped us understand that and do a case out in California many years ago now. It started in 1994 and ended with a favorable appellate decision from the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit of all places that came out in 1999. So Shirley, you are a homeschool mom. And now I imagine you might be a homeschool grandmother.
Yes, I am.
So tell us about your family. How many kids and how many grandkids?
Okay. We have 8 children, and my last one graduated from homeschool high school in 2020. And we have 10 grandchildren.
So how did you and Robert, your husband, decide to homeschool?
Oh, let's see. Way back when we decided to homeschool, we just felt like it was the best option at the time. And we thought we would take it year by year. And it turned out to be a real natural fit for us. I loved it. And I saw the children, the first child responding. She entered when she was 5 years old. So we started from the beginning.
So you homeschooled all 8 of your children right straight through.
I did. Yes.
Yeah. So when did that start? When did she start homeschooling?
It was in 1987. Yeah.
So 1987 to 2020, you were homeschooling at least one child.
Yes. Okay.
You are definitely a professional homeschool mom, and
Thank you.
I'm sure you have lots of great experiences that you could share with our listeners.
It's a wonderful thing to do.
So you started out like many families. You'd be surprised how many people I talk to that, and this includes me, who started out back in the same kind of era, saying, "Well, I'm not real sure, but we'll give it a shot. And if it's not working, we'll do something else." How long was it before you figured that it was working and you decided it was your calling?
Well, very early on, I knew that this is what I really wanted to do. We felt this was the way that we could help our children to be able to express their own individual interests and pursue that. We saw how different they were. The one-on-one instruction was wonderful. Seeing the older children helping the younger children. We always, just had a lot of fun, did a lot of projects, went on a lot of, museum excursions, and really had a great time homeschooling. It was kind of a perfect fit. Not that there weren't those days that I really, doubted that, but we also thought we're not going to quit midstream. We're not going to quit in the middle of the year. We will, really consider that before we made such a huge decision. And we always came back to, yep, we're doing the right thing.
So what kind of things sort of tided you over during those hard times?
Oh, goodness, the Word of God. Yes, we can't live without that. And knowing that my husband was very sure that I was the best teacher for our children. And he said, I don't even mind if it's just you reading to them on the couch and you're just being a faithful mom and doing, the best you could do. He would say, stay on the critical path. This is what I want for us. And I agreed. And I needed that encouragement, but we were united on that.
Were you involved in any, organized efforts like CoOps or things like that back in those early days?
We always had a local homeschool group for park days and field trips. As they went into more the high school ages, I would invite other children over into our home because I felt like writing was a subject that was better with a group. So I just kind of learned how to teach writing, taking courses, and we did that. And other mothers would do things like history or maybe do a little preschool for the little ones. That happened one day a week through the high school, middle and high school years. It was just something in our home, nothing real organized.
And how important do you think that kind of support system is for homeschooling families?
Really important, yes. I always made it a point to go to the conventions and to stay connected with other moms.
You and I met right before the world shut down in early 2020.
Yes.
At the in Sacramento at the CHIA, that's Christian Home Educators Association. I think it's an association. CHIA, Christian Home Educators California, and it was the Capitol Day, and so we were both presenting to the group before we went over to the Capitol, and to set the stage. While I came to work at HSLDA in 2021, and one of the very first cases that I ever read and used a lot, throughout my career, was a case called Calabretta v. Floyd in the Ninth Circuit. And so when I arrived at the Capitol Day, ready to do a presentation, Shirley Calabretta was up front doing a presentation. And I'd never met Shirley, even though I had been acquainted with Calabretta v. Floyd for almost 20 years by then.
Wow.
And I was just so, it was such a completing the circle of meeting the person that's in the case and hearing your story live, that I asked the organizers, could I ditch my prepared remarks, because I was scheduled to follow you, and talk about just how influential this case has been, not just in my career, but as a Fourth Amendment protecting case, protecting families all over the country, and how many times I've used it. So the organizers permitted me to do that. And then they told me the Calabrettas are leaving. They want to take off. And I said, no, you got to stop them. I want them to hear this. I want them to hear just how important their case has been for all these years. Do you remember any of that? Did I make any of that up?
Oh no, that was definitely when we met, Jim, and that was great to hear your side of it as well for me.
As I recall afterwards talking with you and Robert, you kind of expressed that you really had no idea just how that your case had been so influential throughout all the years.
Mm-hmm. We didn't really see the future generations that this would benefit. We just could only see the mountain that was before us, and it seemed like we didn't have that big picture at that point. But we seek to walk by faith and trust God's promises to lead us and guide us wherever we go.
So I came back to Virginia in February of 2020, really excited, thinking, we need to send a video crew and let's do something with this and make it a story. And then we had it sort of scheduled, but then first, like the NBA shut down and then the NHL shut down, which are both tragic. And then the world shut down. Airlines shut down. You couldn't travel, you couldn't do anything.
That's right.
I was working from home, and so we never pulled it off. And then we learned there's this technology stuff that you can do, live podcasts and things like that. So I got with our communications team and said, let's do it now. It's never too late. This is a story that is so important, and it will, it's been so influential in my legal career and in the lives of other people as well. So let's go back to that horrible day back in October of 1994.
Mm-hmm.
Set the stage for us. How many kids were you homeschooling? How many kids did you have at that point living in your home with you?
We had 5 children at that point, a baby, and then a 3-year-old, and then 3 that were homeschooling. Mm-hmm.
So what happened?
A social worker appeared at our door and stated she was from CPS and she needed to come in and talk to the children. She actually tried to enter the home by placing her foot in the doorway and the threshold, but I held the door and I asked her what this was about. She stated she would not state a reason, only that she was from CPS. I knew that she had no right to enter into our home, and so I didn't allow her to do so. She eventually left, telling me that she was going to go get some police assistance to gain entry to talk to the children. She also told me that I was being uncooperative and that she was going to include that in her report.
Now, is this the first time she came, or was this after she came back from vacation?
Oh, okay. So then she did not come right away with the police officer as I expected. Robert came home from work that day, and we called HSLDA as we were members, and they informed us of our legal rights. Mike Smith at that time explained our protections under the Fourth Amendment, that they were clearly intact. We were within our legal rights to protect our home. There were 3 exceptions to that Fourth Amendment, which protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures by the government. And those exceptions were that they could get a search warrant if there was a legitimate threat, or if there was an exigent circumstance, or if the third condition would be if there was consent, like if I willingly opened the door. So she Yeah, she did come back, but it was after 14 days after she had her report, way over a week, I think 11 days after she had come the first time. So we really didn't think she was coming back at that point. But yes, she did return. She had a police officer. I saw them at the, my window. So I opened the front door that was by the window that was by the front door to speak to them. They said they didn't have a search warrant. They were clearly not responding to an emergency, and I did not give them consent to enter. But I asked to know who was making an accusation at that time, what the report was concerning at that time. But the social worker said she didn't have to give me any of that information. I also asked if I could go call my lawyers, which would be you. And the officer told me that no, I could not do that. He said that he was concerned that I was going to go hide something, or I was going to go try to get something. I had no idea what he meant, what he was talking about. But that's when they had returned. So
let me just set the stage here a little bit. One of the important things that the legal community and the benefit of your case was it described the legal framework of how families should be secure in their homes. So things you didn't know on that day that came out later. The tip was anonymous. The allegations were fairly, frivolous, really. In the court case itself, it says somebody called, and made an anonymous report that they heard a young child screaming, "No, daddy, no." And, oh, by the way, the children are school age, home studied, and it's an extremely religious family. That's why she was at your house, to investigate those allegations. When did you learn that that's what the thing that started this whole thing?
Oh, after we were pursuing the lawsuit and during discovery.
Yeah. So this is what she didn't want to tell you and said she didn't have to tell you. And then the other thing that this case really makes clear, and it's something that we work against all the time, is that it's a mistaken view by law enforcement and others that so policemen all over the country know that if they're investigating a crime, the Fourth Amendment applies, and they know the rule is pretty solid. On you can't get into a house without a search warrant or emergency if you're investigating a crime. But many law enforcement officers and child protective investigators believe that those rules didn't apply in this kind of circumstance. So they're there. They don't tell you what it's about. They don't tell you that it's anonymous, that they're just there. And the policeman says that if you don't let him in, he's concerned that something bad could happen. What happened next?
So eventually, although I was committed to not letting them in, the officer enforced me that they would have to, force entry. So I was concerned our children would be hurt because we had glass at our front door. And then I opened the door. I ran to the phone to try to call HSLDA, but the social worker began speaking with the children already. And she was saying, well, I usually start with the oldest. So she began to speak with my 12-year-old daughter, Tamar. And I clearly stated I did not want her alone with my children. But she led Tamar down the hall and went into the schoolroom with her. And here I understand later that she questioned Tamar concerning our the discipline in our home. Questions like, what does your dad do if you spill milk? And she was just really confused by that because she said, well, we clean it up. Like she did not know what was happening either. And she also questioned Tamar on our religious beliefs. Tamar told her that we were Christians and that her parents disciplined according to the teachings of the Bible. And that's what's happening there. In the meantime, I was in the kitchen. The police officer was with me, and it was just a little bit later that I heard screaming coming from that room. So I ran down the hall and I opened the door and I said, "What is going on here?" And she had, it was one of our other children had come into the room, and she was actually seeking to strip search that child.
How old was the other child that came into the room?
Just a 3-year-old, yes, that had come into the room, and she was trying to take her clothes off. My older one told her, "No, you're not going to be able to do that. My parents wouldn't allow that." And then she wanted the older child to do the strip search for her, and the older child wouldn't. As she said, "No, my parents wouldn't allow that." And so, that was. She felt she had the right to strip search as well.
So after you came into the room and your older child wouldn't comply with the CPS investigator's instructions, did she eventually require the removal of the children's clothes to do the inspection?
Oh, just the one. She just wanted to. I didn't know why she.
So the 3-year-old.
Yes, just the 3-year-old.
Yeah, and she kind of compelled you to participate in that, right?
Yes.
So in that moment, and obviously there were no issues, no abuse detected, and the case was dropped. Well, in that, let's walk through this. What kind of emotions were you experiencing? Kind of right at the beginning, you get the follow-up knock on the door. There's a policeman. They come in over your objection, and as time goes on, it just kind of escalated and got worse and worse. How are you doing at that point?
Oh, just absolutely terrified. I never in my ever thought that something like this could happen to me. There was no abuse, but and there was nothing I could even think of that somebody could have misconstrued as some harm against our children, with neither my husband nor I. So I felt very intimidated, very threatened. I had no idea what this was all about. It was just very confusing, but it was just awful.
In that moment of, when the CPS investigator kind of compelled you to do the thing you knew to be wrong and against your rights, what was going through your mind right at that moment?
I mean, obviously they weren't going to relent. So I knew that I had no options there. And I was just very violating of our rights and our moral values and the sanctity of our home.
Talk about that, the sanctity of your home. How was that affected going forward after this day?
Yes, we had previously to this had had very positive interactions with police and any public servants, and taught our children to respect them. And it's like your family's a circle, and the children feel secure in that, and they know what to expect. And then when government intrusion that's so wrong comes in and breaks into that circle, and you're dealing with that mistrust, you're dealing with the suspicion, you're dealing with the fear for a long time with your children. You really are. It's a damage. It's not just a neutral thing for them to come and question children, to question their parents' authority and their family's faith, and to violate our standards that we held so dearly.
How about your children? How did it affect them going forward?
Well, at that time, of course, our sons wanted to, they were just felt very like they should have been able to do a better job protecting mom, I guess. They were little. That was definitely a lot of conversation and a lot of prayer and a lot of reassuring them that we were not going to let anything bad happen, and we were going to be able to protect them, and that we were going to, we were going to pursue this legally because we felt that it was a violation of our rights as U.S. citizens.
And so how did that happen? You pursued it legally.
I guess we were not able to contact HSLDA while CPS was there, but we called them soon after and laid out the entire scenario. We knew what had happened was, wrong, but and HSLDA was already aware that the social worker had come the first time and that she would be coming back with the police. But we remember Mike Smith saying to us on the phone, "I am so incensed by this, and HSLDA would like to take your case to court." We had no idea that what it would involve and that it wouldn't be resolved for another 5 years. But
it's still a tender spot for you, I think.
It is absolutely. It comes back, and it's kind of hard to go back into that space because it's you just don't want this to happen to your family.
Yeah. That was one of the, really touching and striking observations I made when I saw you doing the presentation at the CHIA event in Sacramento, is that here it is, now almost, well, I think it was 25, 26 years later from the day it happened. And it was, you came to certain parts of your story in front of a live audience, and it was almost like you could see what was happening right before your eyes, even then, as you were speaking. Do you feel like you've healed and recovered?
Yes, we have. Yes, God is good.
Yeah. And, the thing that I appreciate about you is that you did tell your story, that that was a very, I think, revealing and helpful story for the people who were there, and that you were, you and your husband and your family were willing to go through that 5-year-long process. Civil litigation in America is a bit of it can be a bit of a grind, and it doesn't move fast. So talk to us a little bit about that 5 years. How was that for you guys?
Well, there was a huge learning curve for me especially, and that it just was a long time. I kept the word of God before me, and I was fearful at first that she would come back, but I didn't feel like I needed to flee or run, for there was nothing that we had done wrong, and clearly she didn't have anything that she was clearly seeing abuse. It was just the entry into our home that was, the violation. So, and it was on their part. And so, I think, those were, it's hard to go through a legal trial. It really is.
So you could have chosen to just put this behind you, move on, get on with your life. But instead, you chose to sue. And let me just go through what that entails. So you have to sit down with a lawyer like me. In this case, I think it might have been Mike Ferris mostly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No? So Mike Ferris, a very young Mike Ferris back in 1994, 95. You have to go through this story again and again and again with painstaking detail to help draft the complaint. And then once the complaint is filed, you have to answer written questions that the defendants put to you. And then um, eventually you come to the day when you have to allow the defendant's lawyer to grill you over the events of that day in depositions. You always had the highly qualified and very professional and inspirational Mike Ferris by your side. But what was that day like, the day that they took your deposition?
I was very grateful to be able to speak, and that I was being heard, and that people were taking it seriously. And I feel like I was able to put it out there, my story out there, and really explain what happened. I just felt all the way through the court legal system, and even that deposition, that people were kind of sympathetic to our story, and that they could see that it was a clear violation.
Well, so after the depositions, and there was a lot of legal mumbo jumbo where HSLDA the defendants asked to have the case dropped because their primary argument was the law wasn't clearly established, because they were under the impression that CPS investigations weren't subject to the same Fourth Amendment rules as other kinds of investigations, and they shouldn't be held accountable because of this lack of clarity in the law. Now, federal litigation begins at a local district court. The district court agreed with you that this was both a violation of your family's Fourth Amendment rights, and that the law enforcement and CPS investigators should have known that at the time, that based on these flimsy allegations, no one could believe that they had a right to come into someone's home without their consent or a warrant, and especially, compel a strip search of a child under these circumstances. What was that day like when the district court ruled in your favor?
Oh, well, we were very joyful about that. I called my husband and said, the court sided with us, and we just were really grateful that that decision turned in our favor that way.
And then what was the day like when Mike Ferris or someone here at HSLDA called you and said that they'd filed an appeal?
Oh, right. Yes, it's never over, like you said. Feels like it anyway. They'd filed an appeal. Yeah, so it went to the 9th District Court of Appeals, and so then we had to go to San Francisco, where that court is held, and go before 3 judges. And that was, it seemed like the judges on that panel were once again clearly siding with us. They looked at the case and they said, we just keep reading through this case to find out what the parents actually did in the first place. Seems like the case never should have happened. She had said in her original report that when she came to the house, that she had seen the children and there was no sign of abuse. They seemed to be all doing fine. And so there clearly wasn't a violation of any of those, an exigent circumstance. There was, I wasn't giving consent, and they didn't even try to get a search warrant, as far as I could tell. So, this, what was this case? It wasn't even about anything except for the fact that the social worker said that there was a fourth exception to that Fourth Amendment, or else that they could also maybe sweep the social worker's investigation for child abuse under the category of an exigent circumstance, or was there a fourth exception? So this was helpful for homeschoolers in that we are able now to be protected with our Fourth Amendment rights. It was very valuable for homeschooling going forward to have such a decisive case at the Ninth District level, because it was kind of now established law in all the Western states, and would be persuasive law in all the other areas and of the U.S. And so I think that is maybe when we began to see the bigger picture. We saw that the final outcome also included that not only was the original entry into our home wrong, which is what the district court had ruled in our favor, that social workers, police officers entering into the home under that Fourth Amendment right was clearly a violation for us. So when we went to the Ninth District, they made it stronger, and they said that they have not only affirmed the lower court's decision, but they further stated that the action after the initial coerced entry, everything that they did was wrong, separating the children from their parents, a strip search, questioning the children on their religious faith, belittling our Christian faith in front of our children. The last point was really significant because when it first happened, and it was on that report, became clear on that report during discovery that our supposedly we're extremely religious, and that was in a risk category. That was it's in itself a violation of our rights, but HSLD didn't include that in the original filing. Maybe you'd be more clear on that, but that was a praise for us as since they didn't take that angle. It was a violation of our freedom of religion, but God saw fit to have that included in the final outcome, that it was against the law for them to make that kind of an issue over our faith. But HSLDA did an amazing job, and we saw the Lord guiding us through every step and giving us favor in the eyes of the court. After the Ninth District decision, we even were standing around talking with Mike Ferris at that point, and she came. One of the assistants to one of the judges walked up to us. She had a big smile on her face, and she said, "Well, we've been praying for you." So,
So they told you immediately, right then and there, that you won, right?
Actually, no, we did wait quite that. I think maybe close to a year. Yeah, I know they have a time limit, and it was right up against that time limit when that came. And that was really a day of rejoicing for us. But then there was also, it could have been taken further to the Supreme Court, and I think we were very happy with our the decision that came out there is very strong for families and trying to homeschool. Now, this goes into another area, because when if we could back up just a little bit here, when she had originally come during the depositions, she had said that she had sought to first go to all the children, to all the schools in the area, and see if they could find where our children were attending school. And so she had gone to the local public schools, and she couldn't find them there. And she said, "Oh, they must be homeschooled." So that is really a point where this makes it a valuable decision for homeschooling, because there are other circumstances that where if our children were in school, then they would be questioned there. And I've heard from a lot of parents since this time, and I don't know how, but people do call me, and people either let them in because they say, "Oh, I had nothing to hide. I can let them in." And, you trust them. They're there to protect the law, and you feel like they are obeying. They themselves are under authority and know the limits to their to their investigation, but it's not necessarily the case. And
so let me just back up a little bit. You'd mentioned that they made an argument for a fourth exception. And so here's how the court, the Ninth Circuit, characterized what they argued. The appellants, the CPS investigator and the law enforcement officer, urged the court to adopt a principle that, quote, a search warrant is not required for home investigatory visits by social workers. And so that is, that was the common understanding at the time, and that was what they actually asked the three judges to adopt as a rule of law, that would say that without an emergency, without consent, and without a search warrant, they can come into a home anytime they want to if they're investigating allegations, even allegations as flimsy as this. And I wanted to circle back to another thing that you said about why this is so important for homeschoolers. Today, we are so blessed, right? In all 50 states, the right to homeschool is legally recognized. Many, 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 many more children are homeschooled today than were back in 1994. Everybody knows a homeschooling family. Lots of people know, the members of their community, members of their church, members, in their people in their neighborhood. Homeschooling has it's not as weird as it was once, and homeschoolers aren't looked at quite the same way as they were 25 years ago and before that. Back in those days, these same investigatory social workers treated the mere fact that a family was homeschooling and religious. Those were both considered red flags. I've actually seen documents here in Virginia where CPS investigators were training lawyers. They said that homeschooling and religion are red flags. So if they go to a house with some allegation, finding out that the family was homeschooled and religious added to the reasons for why they were there. And we actually, in reliance on Calabretta, using Calabretta to support us here in Virginia, that was not a case. We just wrote the agency and persuaded them. Actually, we wrote the Speaker of the House who persuaded them to remove those red flags because, those are not red flags. People choosing to homeschool is not a red flag. People being religious isn't a red flag. They're both protected rights. They can't be red flags to increase, the likelihood that a social worker is going to find something bad. So one of the things that, when a court of appeals writes an opinion, in this case, in 1999, Calabretta v. Floyd, in the old days, they had a choice to either publish the opinion or treat it as unpublished. If it was unpublished, it just resolved the matter between the parties. But as a published opinion, it had legal effect. And so it was a binding authority in that. You mentioned the Western states. I think it was like 9 Western states that the Ninth Circuit has, and persuasive authority in the rest of the land. And so one of my favorite quotes from any case ever written is the last sentence of the Calabretta v. Floyd decision. And we quote it all the time in any kind of similar case. And they say, the government's interest in the welfare of children embraces not only protecting children from physical abuse, but also protecting children's interest in the privacy and dignity of their homes and in the lawfully exercised authority of their parents. And so that's possibly the single most quoted sentence in any of the work that I've done over the last 20 years in this Fourth Amendment area, because it's absolutely correct, right? We understand that CPS investigators have an important job in protecting children who are really abused, but what we don't accept is that their unbridled authority can create harms to children where none was happening before. And so the court really clearly stated that the traditional rules of the Fourth Amendment apply in CPS investigations, that they have to have real evidence, that they have to have probable cause, they have to have either an emergency or a search warrant. And if they don't have those things, they have to go away and leave you alone. And the reason for that is because you as a parent, I as a parent, all of us as a parent, we have a lawfully protected right to protect our children from the intrusion of outsiders who have no business there. And that includes agents of the government. So that's my speech. What do you think?
Thank you. Yes, they got that right. That last sentence is really powerful, isn't it?
And so, I've helped a number of people since this time, and while I was here, in similar cases. Sometimes we've sued to help establish these principles. Other times, this case has helped us we've had families. The Stumbo family in North Carolina had a 2-year-old daughter, and so in the morning they're getting ready, and the 2-year-old is getting ready for the day, and one of her older siblings takes off her diaper and turns around to get a clean diaper. And at that moment, the 2-year-old Joni Stumbo sees their kitty cat outside on the front porch, and she runs outside chasing after the cat in this rural North Carolina neighborhood. And at that moment, a passerby says, "Wait a minute, there's a naked 2-year-old in the yard," and calls CPS. And so CPS investigator comes out to the house later that day, and the Stumbos say, "No, we're not going to let you interview all our kids and search our house and all that stuff." So they went to state court and filed a case urging the state court to order them to comply. And guess what? The lower level court ordered them to comply. We appealed to the state court of appeals. By a 2-to-1 vote, the state court of appeals urged the family, or ordered the family to comply. And then we appealed to the state Supreme Court. And between the Court of Appeals and the state Supreme Court is when I came to work here. And so I actually worked on the brief to the state Supreme Court and went to oral argument with Mike Ferris. And we used the Stumbo case in our brief to the state Supreme Court of North Carolina on behalf of little Joni Stumbo, quoting this sentence. And the state Supreme Court voted 7-0 in favor of the Stumbo family, in large measure because of the precedent that was set here, and so many other cases that we've done that we've used this case. It was a really seminal moment. So I personally, on behalf of HSLDA, I want to thank you and your family for having the fortitude really to, like I said before, you could have just put this behind you and walked away and no one would be any the wiser. But because you took a stand and vindicated your rights, many, 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 many families around the country have been blessed.
I'm really grateful for that. Thank you so much for what you do. HSLDA definitely couldn't have done it without, your guidance in leading through this path.
Well, it's something that, we believe in, that by helping one family in their moment of distress, many, many are often blessed. And without families like yours, many wouldn't have been blessed. So we really appreciate you and other homeschooling families who are willing to take a stand. Is there anything else that I missed that you would like to add?
Well, no, I don't think so. I appreciate you asking, how are the children now? How long, does that affect them? That is a question I don't get very often. And that it really is good to look back and realize that those have a negative effect. And it does take some time to build that, establish trust again, and let the children see that you as a family are going to protect them in every circumstance. You will stand in the gap for them. So that was a good question.
Well, great. So thanks again, Shirley. My guest today has been Shirley Calabretta of the famous Calabretta v. Floyd case out of the United States Court of Appeals from the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco, California, back in 1999. And we've been talking about how influential this bad experience for the Calabretta family turned. And really, we believe here that the Lord used it for the good of many, and couldn't have happened without Shirley and her family. So thanks you again, Shirley. Once again, I'm Jim Mason, president of HSLDA, and this has been another episode of Homeschool Talks. If you'd like to find out more about what we do here at Homeschool Legal Defense Association, you can come to our website at hslda.org. And there you can find links to lots and lots of interesting information, the laws in your state, and stories like this. You can join HSLDA there on our website, and if you're interested, you can make a donation to help us do the work that we do here. You can go into our past podcasts, and we talked to a lot of interesting people about a broad variety of things there. And I'm going to ask our producers to put the case, Calabretta v. Floyd from 1999, into the show notes so you can read it for yourself. And it was one of the most important cases that we've worked on here. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Today's program is made possible by HSLDA's legal support team. We know homeschooling isn't always easy. That's why we're committed to giving you peace of mind, so you can focus on giving your kids the best possible education. As an HSLDA member, you have access to customized legal advice from our team of attorneys to help you comply with your state's homeschool law. And will represent you if your right to homeschool is ever challenged, even in court. Every day, we help our members respond to overreaching officials, and we stand ready to defend your homeschool against unlawful attacks. To hear more about how you can enjoy a worry-free homeschool experience, visit hslda.org/join. That's hslda.org/join. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you've enjoyed this conversation, will you do us a favor by sharing it with a friend or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts? As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes as well as upcoming guests and topics, you can sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. That's all for now. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll see you next time.